If your garden has ever felt like it should be working better, but life got busy and it slowly fell behind, this video is for you, because most gardens don't suddenly fall apart in the middle of the season. They start slipping away before we even plant, usually without us realizing it. When a garden falls apart before it even starts, it's not just frustrating, it's expensive. We lose the chance to replace hundreds of dollars of groceries because a planting window closed before you even knew it was open. In this video, I want to walk you through 3 quiet reasons that happens and how to plant a garden that can still work even when life gets in the way. A lot of people want to grow food right now because grocery prices keep climbing and food quality feels harder to trust. But the idea of adding one more responsibility to an already full life feels overwhelming. You want better food, but you don't want another thing that makes you feel behind. That tension is real, and understanding that tension is the key to fixing the problem, not just pushing through it or quitting. I've seen this reflected constantly over the years when I've heard people talking about managing health issues, working long hours, raising kids, or just going through a season that took more from them than usual. I've been there myself recently, and the garden didn't explode or fail dramatically. It just slowly slid out of reach. This is important because what happens next is where most people give up, and they don't need to. The first reason most gardens fall apart before spring even starts is this. You start the season already behind without realizing it. One of the biggest lessons I learned came from my largest garden. When I had more space, like 28 beds and 3.5 acres more space, I was almost always behind. I planted things later than I meant to. I rushed decisions and told myself it was fine because I live in Zone 8A and technically have a longer growing season. Living previously in Michigan, I kept assuming I had time to catch up. This is a trap a lot of experienced gardeners fall into, and I didn't see it until it was costing me results. I had broccoli that never formed heads and fall-planted carrots that didn't mature until spring, and by then the texture had changed completely. Many of the plants in my garden grew, but they never really performed the way I needed them to. That garden wasn't a failure at all because I learned so much from it, but it forced me to confront something important. Time in the garden is not unlimited, even when the season looks long on paper. It slips away, even with the best intentions. Your first and last frost dates quietly shape everything because they define the real window you're working with. This is where most planning advice skips an essential step. One of the most helpful shifts you can make is to stop planning forward from spring and start working backward from your frost dates. Most people think, spring is coming, what do I want to plant? We grab a seed packet, we look at the picture, and we start dreaming. All of us have done this, and that's how gardens end up feeling rushed and scattered. Working backwards means you start with the end of your season and ask what actually has time to finish before that point. So instead of starting with March, start with the end date, which is your first fall frost, and flip the calendar to that page first. You look at your first fall frost date and consider how long crops need to mature, and then count backwards to see when they realistically need to be planted. This is the difference between hoping a crop works and knowing it fits. It takes guesswork away and helps you avoid putting effort into things that never really had a fair chance to succeed. Now, there's another layer to this that most people completely overlook, and it's just as important as temperature. As you move towards fall, the daylight hours start to shorten and plants grow more slowly because of it. Even if the weather stays mild, crops don't mature at the same pace they do in spring or early summer. That means the days to maturity listed on a seed packet aren't set in stone. That broccoli you were counting on to replace winter grocery sides, if you plant it by the packet dates alone, it can stall before forming heads because daylight runs out. When you work backwards while keeping daylight in mind, you're not just planning for cold, you're planning for slower growth, and that awareness alone prevents a lot of frustration. You can add at least a couple additional weeks for crops planted in late summer for fall to winter harvests. Before we move on, I want to say that nothing we've talked about means you did something wrong or missed some obvious step. Most of the time, the garden just needed decisions sooner than we realized, and that's something you can fix. And even when timing finally clicks, a lot of gardens still struggle for a completely different reason, and this one has nothing to do with plants. This is where a lot of people get stuck because the garden looks like it should be working, but it still feels like too much. The second reason gardens struggle is that they're designed for a version of life that never really exists. Most advice assumes that you have endless energy, consistent time, and backup help. But real life does not work that way. Some seasons are heavier, and as a single mom of 3, I don't design a garden for us on our best week. I design it for the weeks when I'm tired or just trying to keep things moving, and that's a lot of the time. There were days in my huge garden when I'd walk past and think, I don't even have the energy to decide what to do out there. And that's when I realized that the garden wasn't failing, the design was, and that shift changed everything for me. I stopped thinking about what should work and started thinking about what I could realistically take care of on my own. One person, one schedule, and one set of hands. And that's why I mix growing methods now instead of forcing everything into one setup. I used raised beds where I want stability and long-term crops, and grow bags where I want flexibility and easy changes, and self-watering containers for the things we rely on most so they don't suffer if I miss a day. And I don't just grow what we eat, I grow the specific crops that save me a trip to the grocery store, even if I ignore the garden for 3 days. It's all about removing pressure from myself while still getting a return. Watering is a good example. I don't design a garden that depends on perfect timing anymore. I group containers together so I'm not chasing them around the yard. I mulch heavily so moisture lasts longer. And for the areas that matter most, I make watering easier on purpose, whether that's with self-watering planters or a simple irrigation setup that doesn't require me standing out there every single day. And that one change can save me at least 20 minutes of watering every single day in hot July, and that adds up fast. If a garden only works when you remember everything perfectly, it's not a good fit for real life. I also stopped planning crops in isolation. I plan meals first. I look at what we actually eat, what we buy every week, and what supports our health, and then I decide what's worth growing, because growing food isn't helpful if it creates stress at harvest time. So I think ahead about what's easy to use fresh, what freezes well, and what dehydrates easily, and what I can realistically keep up with when things come in all at once. That's why I lean so heavily on crops that fit naturally into everyday meals instead of ones that look impressive but don't end up really serving us. If you want help deciding what's worth growing this season and what you can confidently say not now to without guilt, I put that decision onto a one-page garden planning map, and I'll link it below if you want to take a look. After downsizing to a smaller garden, my confidence has changed completely. Now, in the smallest garden I've ever had, I feel more in control than I ever did before. I know what's planted where, I know why it's there, and I know how it fits into our meals. And because the garden is designed around my life instead of fighting it, I'm able to keep going even when things aren't perfect. That doesn't mean the work disappeared though. Gardening is still work. You still have to plant, harvest, and show up. But there's a big difference between work that feels heavy and work that feels purposeful. When the garden is designed for one person, real time, and real needs, the effort finally starts paying you back instead of draining you. And this is where a lot of people get stuck. They simplify some things, they try to plan better, they genuinely want it to work, but the garden still feels overwhelming. Not because they're doing it wrong, but because there's one last piece that hasn't clicked yet. Most gardens don't become too much all at once. They become too much one good idea at a time. The third major reason gardens fall apart is trying to grow everything. I've been there before. A bigger garden doesn't just mean more space, it means more mental load, more decisions, and more things competing for your attention. Even raised beds and containers, which are supposed to make a garden easier, can quietly become overwhelming when there are simply too many of them to manage consistently. And when that happens, it's not the gardening that's the problem, it's the scale of the garden. Here's one of the most important things I've learned after more than 20 years of gardening, and especially after downsizing. Most gardens don't fail from lack of effort, they fail from lack of focus. And this realization changed how confident I felt in the garden almost immediately. When I finally stopped trying to grow everything and started growing only what actually supports our meals, my confidence skyrocketed. The question that changed everything for me was this: what keeps feeding us consistently, even when life gets in the way? Right now I'm harvesting beets, carrots, green onions, cabbage, and perennial herbs, not because I'm doing more work than I used to, but because the garden is smaller, it's tighter, and planned with intention. I'm starting seeds soon for lettuce, spinach, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, and broccoli, and I'm mapping my cool season crops so I can extend the season and start earlier this year. And just like I plan backward from frost in the fall, I also plan backward from heat in the spring. I don't ask, when is my last frost? I ask, when does it usually get hot enough here that cool season crops stop performing? Then I count backward from that heat window to make sure crops like broccoli and cabbage have time to size up before that heat stress sets in. This is also where variety choice matters. I lean toward heat-tolerant cool season varieties like Bell Star broccoli, my favorite, so if temperatures rise faster than expected, the crop can still finish instead of bolting. That flexibility buys you food instead of frustration, and I'm always thinking about the transition. As cool season beds wind down, summer crops need to already be established so they have enough time to mature and actually produce before we start planning for fall again. That overlap is what keeps the garden feeding you instead of leaving gaps. Last summer got hot very quickly. This winter has been mild, and instead of scrambling later, I'm adjusting now. Most days, my garden doesn't require hours of attention. It needs 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, and harvesting what's ready, checking moisture, cutting herbs for dinner. When a garden is designed well, small actions like that compound, and that's what makes it sustainable. This is where confidence builds because you can actually keep up. Here's one simple thing you can do today that changes everything. Take your grocery receipts for the past year or for at least the past 6 months and highlight the fresh items. Circle the ones that cost the most. And that list, not the seed catalog, tells you exactly what your garden should be growing. This is where gateway crops come in. If you're overwhelmed or just getting started, start with a few crops that are easy, forgiving, and versatile in the kitchen. Herbs, garlic, and beans are some of the best examples. Raised beds and containers are not beginner shortcuts. They are powerful tools that let you control soil, watering, and the scale of your garden. Indoors, microgreens are another way to add nutrition without relying on the season. I'm setting up my Vago microgreen system right now because I want to bulk up our meals with nutrients that I can't reliably get from the store, and it's one of the lowest effort ways to add real food to everyday meals. On the days that I can't get out here, I can still harvest something right on my counter and keep us eating better without it turning into a whole huge project. I want to be very clear about something because this does matter though. Gardening is still work. Obviously, you can't just snap your fingers and have produce on your plate. There will be learning curves, mistakes, and moments where things don't go perfectly. But there's a huge difference between work that feels overwhelming and work that feels purposeful. This isn't about becoming fully self-sufficient or growing everything perfectly. It's about building a garden that supports your physical and mental health in a world where food is so expensive and often disconnected from how we really want to live. If you want to do the grocery receipt audit right now and figure out exactly which crops will save you the most money in the smallest space, click the video on the screen where I walk you through how to decide what to grow so your garden actually feeds you instead of just looking productive.